Folks, our next speaker is Rich Lansky. His subject today is improving athletic performance and power with Olympic weightlifting movements. Coach Lansky currently serves as a strength and conditioning coach for Manatee High School football in Bradenton, Florida. Rich owns and operates two separate performance training companies, Optimum Performance Training Incorporated in Sarasota, Florida, and RCL Sports Performance Services Incorporated in Bradenton, Florida, where he works as a personal coach for NFL, MLB, and WTA professionals, as well as local athletes. Coach Lansky serves as one of the lead instructors for the USA Weightlifting's coaching education program and has taught the Level 1 sports performance club coach and senior coach clinics all over the country since the year 2000. He also served as a USA Weightlifting coaching and collegiate competition committee during the last decade. He is a 1988 graduate of Syracuse University and holds NSCA, CSCS, and ACSM HFC certifications, as well as a Florida teaching credential. Coach Lansky was a former competitive lifter during the 1980s and 90s and won his class in the APA Nationals in 1992. I got to see Rich speak at the University of Tennessee Football Clinic. You guys are in store for a great presentation. Rich Lansky.
Thank you. Morning. I'd like to thank the CCSA for having me out here to present this morning. And I'd like to thank all of you for leaving the exhibition hall and coming on in. A couple of things I want to cover in this presentation, and I'm going to approach it from the background as both a weightlifting coach and a strength and conditioning coach, things I've learned over the last 25 years and applied to the training of athletes. One, how the movements can help athletes improve power production, why the movements are beneficial for helping athletes in strength and power sports. I want to explore the issue of triple joint extension, which is getting a lot of play right now among coaches. I want to talk about effective ways of teaching the lifts in a team setting as they incorporate into a comprehensive strength and conditioning program. Also, I was asked to discuss some common technical flaws and challenges that coaches have working with athletes, especially in large settings, and a couple of the different adjustments we can make. And then also talk about some common concerns of overhead lifts, the issue of pulls versus lifts and pulling from the floor versus hang and blocks. And then also, if we have time, how to best incorporate the lifts into a sports strength and conditioning program. Everybody knows that weightlifting is the only barbell sport that's in the Olympics. It consists of the clean and jerk and the snatch. Quick examples, some of the movements. Full cleans. These are all athletes from other sports. You're all familiar with snatches, with cleans, and with jerks, I hope. Why use weightlifting movements in an athlete's training? While weightlifting is an Olympic sport by itself, the movements have a tremendous potential to allow an athlete to exert and absorb power in a variety of competitive arenas, whether we're talking about on the court, on the mat, on the football field. However, just applying weightlifting as it's done for weightlifters is not the way to go when dealing with athletes. We need to properly teach, coach, and apply it to the athlete's training with respect to everything else going on, not just the overall strength and conditioning program, but also what's going on the field, on the court, the sports technical and tactical issues. Characteristics of the Olympic lifts. Those of you who, well, let me get back here. There we go. I am technically challenged, I apologize. But those of you familiar with the lifts know that the amount of force that's produced, everything is about producing force. Force production and force reduction, whether we're talking about Burns or Gary Gray's ideas, it all has to do with producing force, absorbing the force through stability, and then being able to handle those forces, whether we're talking about acceleration or deceleration. So it's not only the ability to produce maximum force as quickly as possible, but the ability to absorb those forces. Characteristics of the Olympic lifts, their total body activities. They're closed kinetic chain, they're multi-joint, they're ground-based, we're putting force in the ground, and they involve the athletic triple joint extension, the muscles around the ankles, the knees and the hips, the glutes, the quads, the hamstrings. These are all movements that are total body. They allow us to train athletic movement patterns, whether it's jumping on the field. They're multiplanar, they're multi-joint, they're multiple muscle actions. They have real-life demands that are similar to what happens on the court, what happens on the field. They're CNS dominant training. We're going to talk a lot about this when we get to program design. The central nervous system, it's not like doing a set of 8 to 10 on your bicep curls. It's going to have a different stress on your system, and we need to take that into consideration. When we talk about neuromuscular development, we talk about improved motor unit synchronization, activation of motor units, trying to get as many muscles to turn on as quickly as possible. We get better at it when we do the lifts correctly, whether it's through frequency and recruitment or through synchronization between different muscle groups, whether we're talking about agonists or antagonists or synergists, and involve a high rate of force development. If you look at fundamental biomotor qualities that are involved in the movements, you look at speed. Let me get back to that. All right, this is not my Mac, I apologize. There we go. So we look at speed, strength, power, flexibility, mobility, and balance, all involved in this lift. This is Shelton Gilliard, 8-time national champion at 56 kilograms. I see balance, I have to see flexibility, I have to see him able to absorb forces. Potential benefits for your athletes. An improved ability to produce power as quickly as possible, what we call rate of force production or rate of force development. Increased muscle contraction speed. Improved coordination, improved flexibility, improved balance, improved kinesthetic awareness, increases in vertical jump, increases in first step quickness, and enhanced ability to absorb forces. Improved hypertrophy, depending on how we're doing, if we're doing a lot more pulls and things like that in a rep set scheme. And program design benefits. It's time efficient. You're getting more bang for the buck. These are all benefits of the lifts when done properly, when incorporated properly into an athlete's training. If your athletes need to be more explosive, they need to be quicker, they need to improve their acceleration, they need to be able to produce and absorb force more efficiently on the field, they need to express the strength as quickly as possible, or jump higher or farther, the lifts can help you, again, as long as they are performed correctly. Talk about some basic definitions for our presentation. Strength, the ability to generate maximum force against an external load. You have absolute strength or limit strength or 1 rep max. What's the most force you can produce regardless of any kind of time constraints? Power, the ability to overcome external resistance at a high rate of speed and a given unit of time. And then this is what we're after for our athletes, the athletes I work with, the rate of force development. Some people call it explosive power. Your ability to generate maximal muscle tension in a very short time. If I have a lineman or a defensive lineman doing get-offs, he's got to be able to produce that force as quickly as possible so he can express that strength. Being able to squat 500 pounds in a slow movement, some concentric start squatting, that weight is moving slow. Coming up takes a little while to express that power. I look at this picture with a 200 kilo clean and jerk. I've got a little more bar speed going on. I've got a little bit more movement going on. Yes, we need to have a strength base, but we need to be able to express that strength on the field if we're going to get benefits. However you define power, a certain degree of it's going to be essential in strength and power sports. If you want to succeed on the field, on the track, and the court, you've got to have some kind of level of power production capabilities. Study by Garhammer that we use in the USAW coaching credentialing process. It's a great study. Dr. Garhammer out of Long Beach State. Whenever I had a head coach that I had to deal with at any level, whether it was high school or college, and I had to say why I want to do these lifts, I would take this chart out and just look at some of the values. And these bench press, back squat, deadlift, these are all movements that we do. They're all multi-joint, close kinetic chain movements. But when you look at the power output for a 220-pound male or 157-pound female, and you look at the difference on the second pull with 5,500 versus 1,100 for a deadlift, or on the jerk at 5,400, basically the data speaks for itself. If you're after trying to produce as much power as possible, as quickly as possible, I want the bulk of my movements to take place on the platform. Explosive power in the weight room. This is just a compilation of some of the lifting that we do at Manatee. This was from in-season mostly, but these are some of the lifts And you're going to see, you're not going to see perfect technique as you did with some of our weightlifters that we just showed, but you're going to see clean, efficient technique, triple joint extension, absorbing force, producing force. We're going to get a little into these and my philosophies on how to incorporate these lifts. But these are athletes, these are football players at age 14 years old to 18 years old. A couple of these guys next year will be playing for some of you, hopefully. But these are basic movements that we do every morning from 7:45 to 8:30 in the morning with our varsity guys. I'll show you a little bit what we do with our JV a little bit later. But these are just examples of the lifts. All different forms, all different levels. Question of triple joint extension. There's, I don't know if you'd call it a blog or an internet controversy over effective pulling technique with competitive lifting. Well, when we talk about triple joint extension, it takes places. Whether I'm working with an athlete who's working on long jump, vertical jump, a good snatch pull, or acceleration starts, I see triple joint extension happening in all this. So I see hip, knee, and ankle extending into the ground. I see ground reaction forces taking place. Something called the catapult technique that a lot of coaches are talking about now. Right now, a couple of coaches are even writing books and articles on efficient weightlifting technique. Catapult technique involves getting your pull and pulling under as quickly as possible. I think it may be an efficient technique for weightlifters. Zygmunt Smalcerts, our national coach up at USA Weightlifting, is doing this with some of our lifters. However, for athletes who involve triple joint extension on the field, who are putting force into the ground, I need to train them to finish the pull, to get airborne, to get tall. I don't want them trying to pull under too quickly. That's one of the biggest faults I see. So they get here, and they get here, and I'm not getting those hips through. I don't have anybody running like this or doing a vertical jump like this. I want my athletes to get the hips through. And when I'm dealing with 60 athletes at one time in a class, I can't watch every single kid to make sure those hips extend every single time. But if I coach them to get full triple joint extension, to finish the pull, to get aggressive, to get violent in that, I'm going to get the bang for the buck out of training, but it's going to transfer over onto the field when they run or when they hit somebody. Triple joint extension occurs on the field, whether it's my running back, my quarterback, whether it's change of direction. They're putting their foot into the ground, they're producing force through those muscles, they're accelerating, they're decelerating. I'm going to train to enhance that. Talk a lot about the lifts and how they can help improve vertical jump and jumping. If you look at biomechanical specificity, the movement pattern specificity in a pull or in a vertical jump, I see a heck of a lot of similarities going on right there. If you look at this athlete as he's prepared right there, right before he hits that triple joint extension, that's my movement right there before I vertical jump. And then he gets full triple joint extension, the hips are extended. That's what I'm looking for in our athletes. If we talk about specificity of training, what do we talk about? We talk about movement speed. We talk about similar muscles, similar movement patterns, but also we're talking about the muscles going through movements that are similar to what takes place on the field. So if you have athletes involved in these sports, whether you're an Olympic sports person, whether you're a football coach, you got volleyball, you got basketball and the inherent jumping, soccer and rugby, especially with goalkeeping, heading, gymnastics, whether you're talking about D-line for your first step quickness, your get-offs, defensive backs, wideouts with their ability to jump up and go get that ball, go defend it, track and field, sprints, jumps, throws, swimming, even swimming with starts and flip turns, producing force through the legs and the hips, baseball and softball, all of our catchers at the school, all train triple joint extension. Get up, make that throw. Defensive plays in the field, saving a ball that's headed out to the outfield. When we talk about the influence on first step quickness, explosive get-offs, and acceleration, talk about that triple joint extension, the ability to produce force so that Blake here can make his move, get there, make the quarterback's life miserable. Talk about some studies. It's easy for me to get up here and spout what I used to call the gospel about weightlifting, but there's got to be some scientific data behind what we're talking about, and there is. There's a lot more than what I put up here, and these are in your notes and handouts. I'm not going to read verbatim, but there have been studies demonstrating the positive effects of Olympic weightlifting on vertical jump, on 10-meter and 40-meter sprint times. The ability to produce high rates of peak voice development have been shown to be positively related to acceleration as well as sports performance. A lot of this stuff comes from the USOC Coaching College and some of the presentations Dr. Mike Stone has done. If you have not taken the time to look at some of the research done by Dr. Stone, you are doing yourself a disservice in this field. Ballistic exercise training has also been shown to be a highly effective means to develop speed and explosiveness. When we talk about ballistics, we talk about Olympic weightlifting variants. We talk about throws, whether they're med ball throws, weighted throws. We talk about jumps and different squatting variations. Talk about balance, mobility, and stability. For a 312-pound offensive lineman to sit in that deep squat after snatching, he's going to have some decent balance. He's going to have some decent footwork. For our athlete up here, a competitive weightlifter, to hold 330 pounds overhead. For our quarterback when he's running for the end zone, trying to get the corner. We're looking at the ability to train these things. If we train for Olympic weightlifting in a positive manner, if we train the correct way, and we get these carryovers, we're going to see a big increase in these biomotor qualities on the field. When we talk about using Olympic lifting movements to enhance total body power, you've got to teach the lifts so that they can be safely incorporated into a scientifically based program. If all I'm going to do is say, I'm going to take this Russian program or this Bulgarian program and stick my football players on the platform and go verbatim off something I saw in a 1988 video or something I got off the internet, my athletes are just going to get crushed. And they're not going to be better football players because it's not being taken into consideration everything else that we're doing. We've got to incorporate it. It's a whole toolkit. You don't just pull out a hammer no matter what you're doing. If I have a screw I got to put into a board, yeah, a hammer might get it done for a while, but the board's going to get broken and split. I don't want my athletes broken and split. I want to use the right tool for the right job. How do we teach the exercises? I know there are different ways to skin a cat. I know some people have their own system of teaching, depending on who you mentored under, maybe you were a competitive lifter yourself and your coach taught you something different. However, the top-down, which we're going to go over, system that USA Weightlifting teaches, it's very simple to teach, it's very effective to teach, and I can go in, I can take a decent athlete, a freshman athlete, I can get them power snatching, doing a rudimentary power snatch in less than 90 seconds. Sounds like BS, right? Because all you hear about is how technical the lifts are, how hard they are to teach. It's BS, people. It's like teaching any other sports skill. If you teach an athlete how to tackle, we teach Pop Warner kids how to tackle correctly. We teach people how to run. We teach these movements. We teach them sports skills. It's the same idea. Educate yourself on the best way to do it. Practice it yourself. You don't have to practice with a lot of weight. Just drill with a bar and apply it to your athletes. Your athletes are good. If they can get out in the field on Friday night or Saturday and play every day, your athletes can learn how to snatch and clean. One of the things we need to do is we need to screen our athletes. While I love the Olympic lifts, they're not for everybody. If I've got a kid coming off 3 labrum surgeries, going into his senior year of high school, I'm probably going to adapt the volume and the loading in overhead movements. Start with basics. Once they're proficient in the basics, like any other sports skill, I'll move to advanced movements. So in the beginning, all I want our guys doing, and a lot of my weightlifting coach friends was like, oh, don't say this, but all I want my guys doing in the beginning is power snatching, power clean, and pulling correctly. Then I can incorporate it into the program, and I can take the time to teach the full lifts as we go along. But I can get some power production out of them. I can get some basis for improvement in the gym that will transfer over onto the field. So my head coach comes up to me and says, keep doing what you're doing. Always coach the cleanup technique. It's an ongoing process. Even if you've got a 4-time national champion on your platform in weightlifting, not every lift's going to be good. He's going to rush a couple. He's not going to stay over the bar long enough. She's going to not finish her pull. Work on that, people. Always clean up technique, just like anything else. You're not going to allow sloppy technique on the field or on the court. Don't allow sloppy technique in your gym. Don't go after those numbers, no matter how they get there. YouTube makes me nauseous sometimes when I see max-out sessions at some of the high schools or universities around. Guys, I'd rather have a guy or a girl do a 90-kilo or 200-pound clean efficiently, getting triple joint extension, getting good bar speed, than see him get crunched over with 300 pounds, fall to his knees, and not be able to get on the field Friday night. Doesn't do us any good. Match the exercise to the skill level of your athletes. Not every one of your athletes is going to sit in the bottom of a 330-pound snatch, nor do they have to get the goal that you're after. If all I'm trying to get is some power production, I'm going to go with the power movements. I might go with some block movements in season. I may do pulls if they have problems going overhead, if they have some mobility issues. But I will get something with some variant of the lifts. Again, it's not rocket science, people. I'm going to show you a video This is freshman. So freshman in my yum-yum class. My yum-yum class is my second period class. I get freshmen, some JV guys that look like they might be able to help us. Basically, we start them off with a vertical jump from mid-thigh power position. Then we do a vertical jump mid-thigh power position, not a high pull, but more of a just guiding with the elbow. Then we go into overhead where they fix it. He's working with a 15-pound bar and 2 5-pound plates. Go from the top down, mid-thigh, above the knee, below the knee. I'm not going to do a certification course up here, but these are some basic things. And what am I doing? I'm getting his body position set up so that he can produce force effectively without hurting himself. Yeah, he's going to have to work a little bit on getting his knees back as he pulls. This is the first time I got this kid in there. I said, Zach, today we're going to teach you how to power snatch. We're going to record it so you can be famous one day. He's probably our third-string quarterback. He'll probably wind up being a tight end one day by the time he's a senior. But the kid's in there every day now, 12 weeks later, snatching and cleaning, and I was able to get something out of him from day 2. Now, again, if this kid comes in with bad ankles or bad shoulder and he hasn't been screened by our athletic trainer, no, I'm not going to be doing this stuff. I'm going to be adjusting to some other things. All right, it's easy to teach one guy, right? It's easy for weightlifting coaches because they have 3 platforms or 5 platforms that they work on. One guy, you can teach in a team setting like anything else. Coaching the lifts in large group settings is the same as coaching any other sport skill in a large group setting. Our O-line coach does not take, we're in spring football right now. We got 26 kids on the O-line. He does not take one each guy and get them into a stance. It's basic pedagogy when we teach. We show them a skill. We talk about the key points. We let them try the skill, and then we clean it up. It's basic teaching things. If you want to look at, in a group setting, and I apologize that I cut the sound off on this because sometimes I get a little carried away. I don't want to make anybody blush. But just working in a group, we'll go from the power position, jump, shrug. Again, shoulders over the bar. We'll talk a little bit about this. Jump, shrug, give it a kick with the arms, just a guide. One of my mentors, Lynn Jones, used to say never high pull because you pull the bar down. One of the things Roger Nielsen, another one of my mentors, talked about was go ahead and guide the bar when they're learning. Once you get into heavy weights, then you can cut your high pulls. But again, we're going that same idea, showing each thing as they go through. Basically, I've got a linebacker, a running back, and a safety. Not our offensive linemen, just guys doing some weightlifting. Of course, like any other high school kid, they all argue they want to put on the 20-kilo bumpers to demonstrate. So I had to let them know that wasn't appropriate for here. But if they mess up, like Darian just did on the end, we'll break him back down. We'll take him back to the point where he's at. But again, we'll go through and maybe we'll do 2-3 reps. One of the most important things, I'll talk about this when we get to technique. After we get that explosive triple joint, we pull from the floor just to the knee, a lift off. Another thing Roger Nielsen was real strong on teaching me. Get those knees back. Move that bar back to you. It's one of the biggest things we see. We see people doing one pull from the floor, bars out front. They wonder why they're missing or they're jumping barbells over. If you want to add in a power snatch plus an overhead squat. But these are just examples of the progression that we use when we teach and how we can incorporate it into multiple people, multiple athlete groups. Same thing in a power clean. I'll show that a little later if we have time. I want to get to the concerns because it's not hard to sell people. But again, the concerns about technical difficulty in teaching. When you talk about concerns with teaching, what's the biggest thing I hear, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, about overhead movements? A former colleague of mine who's now at a university, I remember the first time we met, and he came from more of a powerlifting, strength and conditioning background, very solid scientific basis, but the first thing he said, yeah, our athletes go overhead. And he's like, well, I may have a problem with that, coach. 2 months later, he's coaching 8-year-olds in clean and jerks. Again, if we do it safely, we do it efficiently, you learn what's going on. Any skill movement for overheads, the athlete needs to be screened for any risk factors. Whether you do a functional movement screen, whether you just send them over to the athletic trainer like I do, or you have a physical therapy, sports medicine department. If somebody's got shoulder issues, yeah, we're going to have some issues with overhead. But once they're cleared, you progress your athlete in a safe manner, and you progress him step by step. He can participate in overhead activities. He's not going to try and clean and jerk 300 pounds overhead the first time, or do a behind neck push press with 300 pounds. He may be working with a bar for a couple weeks. What are we talking about with overhead movements? What do we need to deal with? We need to deal with scapular strength. I used to talk to people who say that the scapula is like the core of the shoulders, the upper body. Whether you're talking about latissimus dorsi, your trapezius muscles, the little muscles in the rotator cuff, rhomboids, all these muscles have to be strong and stable. But even more so, we have to teach proper technique. In other words, teach your athlete to use the big muscles of the lats to push up overhead and fix that up. Don't let that weight sit on their shoulders. Proper loading. Don't start them off with the 45-pound bumper. Start them off with the bar. Get them moving. Proper progression. Move them through a progression. Maybe we start with a bar. Maybe then we load. Maybe we do overhead shrugs. Then we work them to overhead squats. Maybe push presses. Whatever you may think is applicable to that athlete. Again, you've got to have correct mobility and stability as well as your core strength. Vern used to talk about, I think, most stability, where he talked about having maximum stability in the joint, but having enough mobility to go through the sport movement itself. That's what we're looking for. If I've got a kid that gets all the way back here, external rotation, he has no core strength, and he can't hold that weight overhead, no, he's not going to be snatching and jerking until I can get him up to his level, get him strong enough and stable enough to do those things. When you talk about the overhead athlete and the lifts, you may need to adjust training just for purely issues that have nothing to do with training. Maybe your head coach does not want your quarterback going overhead. Pitchers, tennis players, your overhead athletes, volleyball players. However, my philosophy is this. If they are involved in a sport, I was just talking to Mark Kovac this weekend, who used to be the head of USTA Performance. Here's where the serve is on everything going on. Here's where we get our guys strong. Why wouldn't I want to get them stronger in that position? Why would I want to back off and never go overhead? That's like saying, well, my athletes run a lot on the football field. I'm not going to squat at all during spring. We're not going to do any legs. Well, you know what? Your athletes are going to get weaker. You've got to do movements that prepare your athletes. If you're talking about injury prevention, you've got to prepare them for the forces that they're going to experience on the field. When you talk about the catch or racking, if you have issues with athletes with wrists, or you're not willing to take your blue chip quarterback, maybe you do more pulls. Maybe you do dumbbell snatches, or if you're into kettlebells, maybe you do some kettlebell work. There's different ways we can get. That's our 154-pound corner. He does 100-pound dumbbell snatches. What's he getting? He's getting a heck of a lot of core strength, mobility. He's producing power. But he also got dinged up on the other shoulder. So do I just hold him out? No, in season, we're going to do the dumbbell snatches on that side. And in the off season, I'll worry about any inherent imbalances that we may have developed. But in the meantime, he's going to get out there and defend. My personal philosophy, and this is something that one of my mentors, Jerry Palmieri, talked to me about. He does the movements with his athletes. He may never push the envelope with some of these guys, but they're going to get the movement. And even working power cleans or power snatches or pulls at 60%, you're going to get some power production. You're going to get some bar speed. You're going to get some benefit. Talk about what we do a little later in season with our football guys. The pulling motion. Matt Foreman, a former lifter who I'm friends with, once asked me, he started thinking, he said, I got to figure out on my squats, how many squats should I be doing? And then somebody looked at him, I think it was his coach, John Thrush, and he said, every time you pull correctly, you're squatting. You're pushing your feet into the ground. You're getting triple joint. So one of the things I try to teach our athletes is we're putting force in the ground. We're pushing into the ground to develop that force. If our core is strong, or if we're in the right biomechanical position, when I produce that force, what's going to happen? I'm not going to push my feet to the ground. I've yet to see an athlete. I've seen Shane Hammond work out. I've seen some strong athletes, but I've yet to see an athlete put his foot through the floor. Everything's strong. Force is going to be redistributed. He'll push himself away from that solid force. Same thing in sprinting. So teach your athletes not to pull, not to round the back, not to think of it as a pull, but think of it as a press. Starting position. These are basics, but you'd be surprised how many high-level athletes I see. We get guys coming in for combine prep over the last couple of years. They come from places that did cleans, that did platform work, and they got crap technique, people. They got big lifts. I'm not going to call out anybody or anything like that. Everybody's got their own issues. But if I've got them for 6 to 8 weeks, I've got to clean it up so they don't hurt themselves when we get a carryover. Main thing, body levers are tight. This is right out of the USAW stuff. And I will say it because it's the best way I've found of teaching. Last 25 years, I was a power lifter, and I saw some guy at Nationals that kicked my butt that day doing power cleans, warming up for the deadlift. I said, I need to learn about that. So, going back, I had to teach myself and break any preconceived notions I had. These things are the basic cues, and if you follow them, your athletes will be safe, and they'll get some power production out of their training. Feet will be turned out slightly, vertical jump position. Back is flat or even slightly lordotic. Drew's bent over a little bit here. Arms are straight, elbows rotated out. It's another big thing. I get so many athletes that pull this way, and they pull back here. Get those elbows out. Keep those wrists cocked in. Keep that bar close to your center of gravity, over your base of support. Heads up, eyes are focused straight ahead. Hips higher than the knees. Shoulders in advance of the barbell. Now, you may have an athlete with a short torso, long femurs. You may need to adjust some things. But try to get those shoulders at least even. Because if those shoulders are back in a deadlift, everything's going this way. I don't want things going this way. I want things going this way. And on the field, I want them going this way. The barbell should come off the floor and move back to the athlete. Notice that shoulder and hip angle did not change. The hips, shoulders rise at the same time. Head stays level. Shoulders stay over the barbell as long as possible. You hear coaches talk about stay over the bar, stay over the bar. The knees need to shift back to allow the barbell to clear them. Otherwise, you will not get into a good transition between first and second pull and that movement, what some people used to call the scoop or the double knee bend, which people have shied away from. It happens, people. Whether you can teach it without even mentioning it because you get the knees out of the way, or whether you want to teach it by explaining it, fine. But it happens, so we need to have our athletes prepared to produce the force there. When you clear those knees, that gets me into my vertical jump position. But if I don't clear the knees and I come straight up here, what am I doing? I'm going to fall forward. If I'm using any kind of heavy weight, I'm going to lose the weight. And if I do pull, it's going to be a straight line here while my hips are here. What do we know about center of gravity? I got to get everything here over here. It's not the way I want to play the game. So one of the biggest things that we can do with our athletes is teach them how to get those knees out of the way. It's a heck of a lot easier to move the bar back to you in a straight line than to move the bar around your body. If I'm running from here to there, I don't want to go there, there, and there, so I don't want that bar getting any horizontal deviation. The more horizontal deviation I get of that bar, I'm going to lose bar speed, I'm going to lose velocity, I'm going to lose acceleration. I don't want to lose those things, I want to gain them. The second pull, the explosive finish. We teach our athletes to try and stay flat-footed as long as possible, not get on the toes. A lot of people talk about the catapult technique, talk about, well, coaches teach you to get up on your toes. We don't teach you to get up on your toes. We teach you to jump. We don't teach you to stand on your toes. You stay flat-footed as long as possible, you got a greater surface area in which you're producing force if your foot's flat. When the barbell contacts that mid-thigh, that power position, that first position that we teach, the first thing I did with that freshman, put him in the power position, that mid-thigh. Then he executes triple joint extension. It's vertical jumping with the bar, gymnastics with the barbell, whatever you want to call it. It's violent, it's aggressive, and it's the same movement I see on the football field every Friday night. Second pull has to be faster than the first pull. Somebody used to always ask when we teach the courses, how fast should I pull off the floor? Well, pull as fast as you can while maintaining body mechanics, but the bar has got to continually get faster. If it slows down, we're not doing what we're supposed to do. So loading is going to be very important in that respect. Your receiving position. Lifter pulls himself under the barbell to receive the load. Feet move from a pull position or a vertical jump position to a squat or an athletic position. What do I want to teach my athletes to do when they jump? Land, sit, get the hips back. That's how we absorb force. All right. Well, why not just pull? A lot of coaches just like doing pulls. They don't like doing the lifts. They always say, well, why do I have to catch? Why do I have to receive? Well, the first thing they say, well, it's easier to teach a pull. I don't know if it's easier to teach the correct pull. Same technical issues surround. You still got to get those knees back. You still got to get that bar moving back to you. You still got to get explosive triple joint extension. What happens with pulls, a lot of people load them up. They turn it to deadlift shrugs. Or they get those hips shooting right up here and here. I don't want my players here on Friday. They're going to get slapped on the top of the head and eat some dirt. Pulls also lack the eccentric force absorption, the deceleration training that's effect from catching in the snatch, in the clean. When I jerk, absorbing. If I don't remember the force reduction relationship, I will not get that stability. My athletes will get hurt if they're not prepared to take a tackle. It's great that I can tackle, but if I have a 296-pound defensive tackle in the 3 technique coming up and hitting a 300-pound lineman, guess what? Even if he hits him and knocks him on his butt, he's still got to absorb some force. He's still got some collision going on. We need to prepare our athletes for that. The ability to absorb forces in the eccentric manner allows an athlete to decelerate and then reaccelerate, change of direction, quickness. It's key to on-field success. You know, whenever people say, well, what do I need to train this type of stuff for? I put in videos. I put in videos of Tommy Frazier since he's a graduate of our high school. I put in videos of Barry Sanders, and I show change of direction. I show force absorption, reacceleration. Also, When you go heavy on your pulls, you're adding in a higher mechanical load on the spine, on the lower back, as just in addition to the CNS overload factor. So now you have two different types of stresses. That's going to be really important to consider when you load your athletes, especially in season in collision sports or contact sports. Whether it's football, whether it's rugby, whether it's wrestling, hockey, basketball, whatever it is. We've got to be real careful in what we do with our athletes as far as loading them so that they are in shape to play the game. Common technical mistakes. When Ethan had talked to me about presenting here, Tom Cross gave me a call and said, make sure you talk about the bar coming off the floor. I guess in the certification aspect, he says that's one of the things he sees all the time, is the bar not coming off the floor correctly. Well, a couple of things that I see. I figured out what are the 4 or 5 most technical mistakes that I see when I have athletes come from other programs or when I'm working with athletes in the beginning. 1, allowing the barbell to drift outside your base support. What's our base support? It's determined by our feet and our center of gravity. The barbell must come back to the lifter. If that barbell does not get past the knees, get back to that power position. If I'm not here with that bar and I'm here, I'm not going to have a successful lift. Mike Conroy, one of our weightlifting coaches, who was one of the first guys that taught me about lifting. Mike Conroy used to have this thing where he would set up our athletes when he came to visit in their starting position. And he'd draw basically put like an invisible tube from the tip of their nose to their butt. He said, you know what? If the bar can stay in that column, that invisible column, you got a good chance of making your lift. How do we keep the bar in that invisible column? By bringing it back to the lift or getting back to the power position. You've got to shift the knees back so you can prepare for that double knee bend activity. Do not move the barbell around the knee. If you see this, which we see, I see it at nationals. There are some really strong athletes out there who still lift incorrectly. One of my best weightlifters lifted incorrectly up until probably the last 4 years of his career and still was able to break junior American records. How to break it down, how to break bad habits, how to get him lifting correctly, how to get that bar moving back to him. We get a loss of velocity, loss of acceleration, that horizontal deviation. We've got to stay away from that. Let that bar, if you're looking at it, we'll talk about looking at cues in a little bit. If you're looking at that bar, it's got to come back and come up. Jumping forward during the second pull, it wipes out everything that I am trying to achieve by using these lifts to help improve triple joint extension. So if I get this, jumping forward, that's not what I want. The barbell will drift away from the athlete, causing him to jump forward or shift forward on his toes. It happens when the athletes aren't patient enough. They pull too low. They don't stay over the barbell long enough. You've got to get your athletes back to that power position. So when I have an athlete who's having issues with pulling from the floor, what do? I break them back down to that power position. You know what? If they stay there 90% of the time for the first 6 months I'm working with them, I'm still going to get some great results out of there. Also, one of the things with hang cleans, a lot of guys like stretch reflex hang cleans, and we use hang cleans in our program every so often. I prefer blocks. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we use hang cleans. But a lot of people hang clean where they hinge and go. That's great. We're getting that stretch reflex. But 90% of the time I see athletes with heavy weight hinge, go, and jump forward. And everything is horizontal instead of vertical. And I want vertical. I am going to put my foot in the ground behind my center of gravity when I sprint. I want to get that kind of movement. I don't want to get this kind of movement. When we talk about blocks, whether you build your own, everybody laughed at me when I built those in '98, but they're still in our training hall today. So whether you order blocks from Samson, from Dynamic Fitness, or whoever, they're a great tool. Different blocks can be adjusted, different heights. You can work on different technical issues. If I have athletes who are having problems shifting those knees back, I can set the blocks up right here and we can work from there. But if I work that athlete and rep him out in sets of 5 for five sets of 5, and I'm trying to get technique, even with a light weight, and I'm going from the hang the whole time, guess what? They're going to start fatiguing. Their lower back's going to start fatiguing. They're going to start rounding at the shoulders. Get it set up so we can get them set up on the blocks. They can go right from that position. Also, if you want to increase rate of force production, going from a dead stop, from a pause, like an offensive line or a defensive line stand, to going boom, the blocks are going to help you a lot versus the hangs. You can use blocks, you can use the power the trays, you can use power rack if you want to. When I first started, I had a power rack. Yeah, it beats up our bars a little bit, but you were able to set up the pins at different heights. Incomplete hip extension and pulling under the barbell too early. I alluded to this a little earlier. You've got to finish the pull. You've got to have your athletes finishing the pull. You don't jump or sprint without getting your hips to completely extend, and that's a caution on the heavy high pulls. We use that high pull guide more as a teaching mechanism. But when you do those heavy high pulls, a lot of athletes will get early arm action. center of gravity, if they weigh 180 pounds and they're using 300 pounds, they're going to pull themselves down here. That's not what I want. I want them getting extension up. I want the legs and the hips to propulse up, not to be pulled down. If you don't finish the pull in your lifts, if you're going to do power cleans, power snatches, pulls, and you're not finishing the pull, you're not getting tall, you're not getting complete hip extension, you're not going to get the results, you're not going to get the improvement in sprint performance, in jumping that you're looking for. And then you're like, well, these don't work, or your athletes don't buy into them. But if I got an athlete and I take them for 6 weeks getting ready for Indy, and then we teach them how to pull correctly, and they see a benefit, and each time we test every 2 weeks, they're seeing the vertical jump go up, it sells itself. But if you don't do them correctly, you're not going to get the carryover you're looking for. Just like if I want to get strong in a squatting position from here to here, and all I do is squat from here to here, guess what? I'm not going to get strong in that bottom position. Specificity of movement, people. The deadlift shrug combo makes me cringe when I see it. Remember, when you pull, it should be the same mechanical motions, the same technique as when you do the power snatch, power clean, or the full clean, full snatch. Double knee bend must occur. You've got to get those bars back. You've got to get full extension. You've got to jump and shrug. A lot of it has to do with proper loading. When you load pulls more than 90 to 120%, I tend to stay about 110%, so I don't even have to worry about it. But when you load up and you put on 130% on a pull of their max lift proper, guess what? Mechanics are going to change. It's like putting on a 70-pound weight vest for your athlete and having them run 40s. Guess what? That trunk position is going to be different from when they run. You're not going to get that overload you're looking for. You know, when we talk about a 10% rule, it's the same idea. When looking at technique, cause and effect, a lot of people watch a lift and go, man, that looked like crap. Or, man, he missed it out front. Well, why did he miss it out front, coaches? Let's figure it out, not just say, hey, do a better job, but don't miss out front. Let's figure out what the cause is. Your ability as a coach to look at a movement and figure out what the cause of the movement pattern deficiency is allows you to make adjustments, and then all of a sudden your athlete's set up for success. Trust me, people don't want to get on the platform and miss their lifts. They don't want to do that. Once the cause is determined, we can clean it up. It's an ongoing process. Always find the reasons behind the faults. Work at perfecting technical or physiological mechanisms that are contributing. If they're tight in the hips or something like that, get them and do. I'm not a huge corrective movement guy. I have an athletic training staff for that at school. But if they need it, I send them over there, I get it done. If he says, okay, incorporate this in the warm-up, I'll do it if it gets them into that position. But no matter how much I try to get technique, if they can't get into a proper position, it's not going to happen. So we've got to loosen them up or tighten them up, whatever the case may be. Think about observing the lifter from a variety of angles. We've got our platform set up. I get to walk up and down the corridor between, but at the same time, every so often, I've got to get over here. I've got to look at it from 45 degrees. If I'm looking at bar path, the way the bar is moving, I want to go right from the side. If I'm looking at how the bar is moving in relation to the athlete, I got to get a 45-degree angle. If you looked at that, the V-scope thing that we had up there that they did at USOC with one of our lifters, you notice a side angle and a 45-degree angle. Technical issues. You want to see what's going on. Always strive to clean up technique. I've been coaching athletes for 25 years now. Guess what? I'm always trying to make them better at whatever we do, whether we're running, whether we're cleaning, whether we're squatting. Always try to clean up their technique. One, as they handle more weight, as the volume increases, as they get stronger and they are able to handle more weight, there's a bigger risk to that athlete. Two, we want to extend their playing career as long as possible. If all I cared about was beating my guys up for 4 years at Manatee and then sending them off to some school when it's somebody else's problem, I'm not doing that athlete a service. I'm here for the kids too. I would love to see those kids play on Saturday and then eventually some of them on Sundays. That's what I want to do. I've been at Manatee for a year and a half now, and we got to turn things upside down when I got there. But the kids buy into it. They're getting better. I'll tell you, the crop that we're going to send to your schools in the next couple of years, you're going to be real happy when they get on the platforms. It'll make your job easier. Competent coach will develop an eye for technique, your ability to assess a problem. Whether we're in competition, if a kid misses a lift out front, bring him back, tell him what he did wrong, he goes back out, he makes a lift. Or I can get in his face and say, you're doing it wrong, get out there and make it. It's not going to do it. If our D-line guy is getting beat and he can't get around the edge, and we're yelling, well, get off the ball faster. It's like, no, drop your shoulder, try to come in from there. We may call a jet, whatever it might be. We've got to figure out what's going on. Which exercises are best? Now, these are just variations. There is no, it's not the Bible, people. These are things that I've found over the last 25 years working as a weightlifting coach and a strength and conditioning coach at different levels. This is what I found to the biggest bang for the buck. But what it shows you, and these are, you can refer to these in your handout, what it shows you is you have an enormous variety of lifts to choose from. If your athletes are a little beat up, like on Friday morning, our game day, one of the things I turned over when I first got there is we lift on Friday morning. What they used to do is sit there, watch film, and probably eat donuts. We lift on Friday morning. We may only go 30 to 50%, but we lift on Friday mornings. We're going to jazz up the central nervous system. We're going to get it going. So I might do front squat plus power jerk, or I might do back squat plus behind neck jerk, something like that. 30, 50%, but we jazz them up. They feel good. They're ready to go Friday night. Talk about some of the one of the things you always hear about pressing overhead, behind the neck movements. Push press, power jerk behind the neck, split jerk. We use a lot of power jerks behind the neck. Everybody always talks about external rotation and shoulder abduction. Well, people, if you're teaching it right, this danger zone from here to here that you're pressing never happens because momentum from the hips and the knees and the muscles there drives that bar to here before you're ever kicking any tricep or anything like that. Your shoulders aren't getting the work. If you're teaching it right, if they're driving with their arms first, pushing themselves away, you're not teaching it right, and you're not going to get the results you're looking for, and your athletes are going to get injured. Different squat-related works. Let me say it right now. I believe in the back squat. I believe in the back squat till the day I die. All right? I know there's all kinds of articles out there about the death of the back squat. People, it's a basic movement pattern. We squat. I do it every morning when I get up for a couple minutes. We squat. Your athletes will squat. They need to be able to do these things. Yeah, we do single leg stuff. We do split squats. We do rear elevated squats. But the bulk of our program is we back squat once a week, we front squat once a week, and we overhead squat once a week. Combination lifts, great in season if you want to save time like we do on Friday mornings. More bang for the buck. If I'm doing a power clean plus a front squat, I'm getting a pull off the ground. I'm getting explosive triple joint extension. I'm getting core stability. I'm getting thigh development. If I'm doing back squat plus behind the neck jerk, same idea. All kinds of different combinations you can do. Basic strength movements, like I said, incorporate it with the stuff that you do already. Just because I love doing stuff on the platform and 80% of what we do is on the platform doesn't mean I throw our benches out, people. It's Florida high school football. We're going to bench. Going to have to bench. I'd have a revolt. But we're going to do different types of benches. We're going to do a lot of incline. We're going to do a dominator bar, a neutral grip. We're going to keep the hands in, thumbs up. And that happens on the field. That's what I want. So we're going to press that way. We're going to do a variety of rows. I do a 2-to-1 ratio, especially with our kids, because they've probably been bench pressing in their basements or at the YMCA since the 8th grade, 7th grade. So we do a 2-to-1 ratio. We do a lot of bent over, band rows, incline rows, dumbbell rows. We have fat bars we row with that. I tell our kids that I want their jersey, the jersey of the opponent coming off in their hands before the hands come off the jersey. I want good grip strength. RDLs perform correctly. That's a whole other thing we can get into. I don't have time. Glute ham raises. My single joint stuff, my step-ups, lateral step-ups, crossover, forward, lunges, different planes. If you want to use Gary and Vern's dumbbell matrix with the lunges, there's all kinds of things you can do to get your athletes. It all works together. Program design. Here's the biggest thing that when I get up and I talk to strength and conditioning professionals, or I talk to high school coaches, don't lose sight of the objective of your training process. What are we trying to do? We're utilizing the lifts to help our athletes excel in strength and power sports on the court, and on the field, on the mat. We're not developing weightlifters. If some of these people want to become weightlifters later on after their college or professional careers are over, or high school, that's fine. But right now, our athletes are training for performance on the field. So, like I said, I don't need perfect technique. I'm not trying to get my kid to athlete. I need safe, efficient technique and working form so we can incorporate these things into our program. As with any movement skill or sport drill, I'm always going to be coaching it up, always trying to refine technique, working for improvement. If a kid's not safe, he's not getting on the platform. He may be doing jump shrugs over in the corner, but he's not getting on the platform until he can safely do the movements I need him to do. With that being said, I've had pretty good results. I get 40 kids in first period, 40 kids in second period, and they're all able to do some kind of power snatch, power clean by week 2 of our program, as long as they've been cleared. What's my basic minimum skills competency? Our basic minimum skills competency. These are the things that I have to see before I let an athlete get into a full program. They initiate the legs, the barbell moves back toward the lifter. We talked about that. I'll harp on that. In fact, if there's one thing I want you to take away from here, get your athlete initiating, pushing into the ground, getting that bar back and clearing the knees. Athlete's hips and shoulder angle relationship does not change during the first pull. The athlete shifts his knees back so the barbell trajectory remains over his base support while the bar moves in a straight vertical path so we don't lose acceleration or velocity. Athlete stays over the barbell. He waits until the barbell gets to that mid-thigh power position before hitting that violent second pull. Athlete completes the movement with an exclamation point, not a question mark, which means I don't want to see, because then they don't pull out. I want to see that. I want to see them get up, get through. I want them to finish like they would finish a tackle, like they would finish through the finish line on a sprint. Feet are going to move out, receive the bar with a stance that's close to front squat, linebacker, whatever you want to call athletic posture, but they're going to be at a base absorbing the force. I don't want them cleaning and landing on their heels and falling backwards and breaking their wrist. Key points to remember in program design when designing programs featuring these patterns. This is our D tackle. He's good enough that with little training, one stayed in shot put last weekend. This kid's an animal, but he's a baby too. He's only 16. Our Olympic lifts are CNS dominant. Treat the volume and the rest intervals in the same manner you would treat your sprints and your plyometrics. In other words, I'm not going to run 20/40s the day before our game. Same time, I'm not going to max us out with 10 sets of singles at 90% in a power clean or power snatch the day before. They're going to be fried. Their central nervous system needs a different level of recovery than just mechanical. Everybody's easy enough to back off on squats after Tuesday on game week, but they're going to want to clean heavy. Remember, there are differences between mechanical stresses and central nervous system stresses. How the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems respond and how your athletes respond is going to vary depending on what kind of stimulus you give them. Remember that when you're doing your program design. How heavy load should be used when training athletes? Well, for a given athlete competition, this is from Dr. Stone as well, they found that as the weight gets heavier, the duration of the pull increases. Maximum and average pull velocities both drop. Maximum bar height, how high the bar gets, drops. Overall power production drops. Does that sound like anything I want to happen with our athletes? No. I don't want less work being done over a longer period of time. On the field, on the mat, on the basketball court, I want as much work as possible in the shortest period of time. I want explosive power. That being said, we know that maximum power outputs with Olympic lifts are highest with sub-max lifts. If we're talking about the competition snatch, a full snatch, or a full clean, you're looking at 80 to 85% of your 1 RM. 85 to 90% on the power derivatives. So if my best power snatch is 200 pounds and I want to increase maximum power output on the power snatch, I'm going to work somewhere around that 175, 180, 185. I'm not going to max every day. I'm not a 1988 Bulgarian. I'm not trying to go as hard as possible and see if I break. Because I'll tell you what, if my starting quarterback breaks doing this, I'm not so confident with the number 2 guy coming in that we're going to do the same thing. So I don't want my athletes to break. I want them to get better. Practical application, athletes with slower than desired movement speed. Almost every athlete I've ever come across, I want them to be able to go faster. They train to increase power, focus on those percentages during the preparatory phase. When do I incorporate these lifts into the program? These are just examples. Off season, my goal is to improve strength and muscle mass, like during our winter program conditioning or during the summer, I'm going to concentrate more on pulls, push presses, RDL, squats, some of these movements. I'm going to go 4 to 6 sets, 3 to 6 reps, 65 to 85% of my 1 RM. My loads may go up to about 110% for pulls. Squats, I stick between 70 and 90%. I found over the years that I get more bang for the buck by staying in that 70 to 90% range in our lifts throughout the whole year and not going back and doing a hypertrophy set of 40% for 4 sets of 15 for 2 weeks with our athletes. I get more bang for the buck doing this. I continue with power snatch, power clean, and jerks the whole time for technical work. I may only go 60 to 75%. I'm still getting power production. I'm still getting speed carryover, but my athletes are getting better and more efficient so that when we push these lifts later in our training cycle, they're more efficient. They're able to handle the loads. As we get ready for our first game in August, preseason, we're concentrating on converting strength to power. We do more of the power derivatives, the power cleans, the power snatches, jerks from the rack, power jerks, lighter pulls, maybe that's 70, 90%, lifts from the blocks. I do a lot of block work as we're getting in there. We do 3 to 5 sets, 1 to 3 reps per set. I would much rather do more sets of fewer reps. I would much rather do 5 sets of doubles or triples than 3 sets of 8. I want quality of movement with these lifts. I want good quality effort. I'm not looking to use cleans as an endurance exercise. No offense to any CrossFitters in here. I'm not looking to do that. I'm looking to get quality of movement so I get good carryover for my athletes when it comes time, which is on Friday night for us. 3 to 5 sets, 1 to 3 reps per set, 70 to 90% 1 RM. Continue to push the squats at 4 to 6 sets, 3 to 6 reps, go up to 85%. We do that up until a week before we go into our first game week. In season, what I do is I don't back off. These are high school guys. Now, they've got natural occurring androgens. They're growing. They're getting stronger. They can recover. Of course, if somebody's down, somebody's backing off, I see bar speed start to drop. I mean, Roger used to tell me that all the time. When you see that bar speed drop off, back off. You're not getting the results you're looking for. So, I'm trying to build maximum power, rate of force development all through the season, because when we get into the playoffs, I want to be knocking people over. I want our guys being as explosive as possible. And these other schools that back off, don't squat their guys because they're tired or they had a rough game in the week, no. I want to be coming home with the rings. I want our athletes to achieve what they can do because they are able to do it every week. So when we train Monday through Friday during the off season, we train Monday through Friday during season 2. We go 3 to 4 sets, 1 to 3 reps per set, 70 to 90% 1 RM. Our squats, the only adjustment I make is our heavy squat days either Monday or Tuesday. We go 2 to 4 reps, 75 to 85% 1 RM, but I may do 4 sets of that. Lighter loading and volume on Thursdays. My front squat on Thursday or overhead squat, but we're still going to get squat because our legs are used to it, their body's used to it. Why change it just because we're into season? You know what? They lift every morning with me, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and they practice every afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. A game is just a high-intensity practice. In fact, we get less reps on the game. How to set up the weekly and daily plan with respect to lifts. This is info I've got from Vern and Rob Rogers. Speed early, and this is not just in the session, but in the week. Speed, then power, then strength, then my fitness, conditioning, endurance, whatever you want to call it. But remember, stress is cumulative. The only difference here is that fitness, conditioning, endurance, we pull out. You know how we condition our guys in season? We do multiple sets of 10-yard sprints or multiple sets of 20-yard sprints. Every so often, we'll add in for our wide outs some long stuff. But they're getting enough run routes, they're getting enough conditioning there. We do our work in the gym and during our warm-up. Remember, your stress is cumulative. If I'm going to do a heavy leg day during the summer, just because they want to change it, they want to go throw 7-on-7s, and then all of a sudden, they say, okay, bring them in the gym and do your cleans. No. One of the things that you want to avoid, hamstring pulls, quad pulls. I don't want our athletes sprinting or jumping in a fatigued state. I want to get quality movement, so I'm going to follow this. This has served me really well for the last 10 years. I'm going to stick with it. Training session, this is just out of USAW, very basic stuff, but you'd be surprised. High skill levels at the start of the session, the faster the movement, the earlier in the session when you're jazzed, when your central nervous system. That doesn't mean the first thing we do, we're going to warm up. We're going to do a dynamic warm-up. Your pulls and your partial movements are going to be performed toward the end in relation to your lifts proper. Alternate your push and pull. Combine exercise if you need to expedite the workout, especially in season. Power clean plus front squat plus push press, front squat plus jerk. Our beginners, like my freshmen and my sophomores, our guys on freshman and JV, we'll do more different variety in season, where we'll stick with the basics during the season. And I always finish with some kind of flexibility, mobility training. Photos and information. I got a lot of information from a lot of people that I respect in the field. Dr. Stone, Dr. Garhammer, USOC. A lot of the photos are from our championship run this year. Personal communications that I've had over the years with people. These are all people that have made their mark in strength and conditioning as well as weightlifting. Thank you for the CSCCA for inviting me to share my thoughts with you. Thanks to Coach Canan at Manatee for allowing me to do something different with his athletes than they've done in the last couple of years, and the athletes that I get to work with. Thank my wife who put up with me traveling for the last 12 years overseas when I was working with USA Weightlifting. I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who blesses me to work with athletes every day. And I appreciate your attention. How are we doing on time?